Okay, so I'm Lauren and I'm with VSAC. And whoever's in here is currently in the Government and Public Administration breakout room. And I'm going to have our panel members introduce themselves by telling you their name, job title, and where they work. So we'll start with Erik.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Erik Wells. I'm the town manager for the town of Williston.
And hi, folks. My name is Charlie Gliserman. I use she, her, they, them pronouns, and I'm the public engagement director at the Vermont Early Childhood Advocacy Alliance.
Awesome. Thank you both. Okay, and then so we can open it up with any questions, any initial questions, and I will be monitoring the chat. And I'll give that just a second if anyone has any initial questions. Okay, I'm not seeing anything pop up, but if you do have questions, you can just put it in the chat and then I can ask them later. VSAC also has some questions that have already been prepared. So I will start asking you both them.
Okay.
So the first one is, when you were in middle school, what did you think you would want to do for a career? And how did you get there? Or sorry, how did you get from there to where you are today?
I'm happy to start off.
Okay.
So when I was in middle school, I think I wanted to work in the arts. You know, I played violin and sang in choir. It felt like kind of a natural match for me. But I was also in student government, and kind of as I grew older, my interest in policy and government and kind of my involvement in that developed. And right outside of high school, I interned with my local assemblywoman, Carrie Warner, in Saratoga and Washington County of New York. And I loved it. And just kind of knew after that and my love of political science classes when I got to college at the University of Vermont, that was the right career path for me. And so that's what I'm doing right now, doing legislative advocacy work.
And in middle school and starting in high school and college, I always wanted to be a sports writer growing up. So different career path than where I ended up right now. But I grew up in Vermont, in Barrie, in central Vermont, and I went to St. Michael's and studied journalism there. And I did some sports writing in college. And then ultimately I decided it wasn't for me. And what I ended up doing was working in nonprofit communications for a nonprofit at St. Mike's that supported local highway departments in the state. And that got me really interested in local government and the effect that we can make on a daily basis for everyone. And I ended up getting a master's degree at UVM while I was working at that first job. I eventually started working for the town of Milton with an entry-level job in the town manager's office there, and transitioned over to Williston a couple of years ago, and as the assistant manager, and then I was hired as the town manager this past August when the longtime town manager retired. So I think if someone asked me in middle school if I plan to be a town manager someday, I would probably ask, what is a town manager? So it was an interesting path.
Absolutely. Thank you both. And the next question is, how does your work make a difference in the community? And how can the next generation entering the workforce make a difference on the job?
You can go first, Erik.
Okay. Well, I guess with local government work, we kind of touch all aspects of the community when living in a town. You can think about public safety with fire and police, public works, keeping the roads clear in the winter, water, sewer service, different cultural aspects as too, parks and recreation, library, and the planning and zoning piece that goes into planning the future of the community. So as a town manager, I manage all of those pieces and supervise those department heads and make sure our residents have the level of services they need to prosper and have a vibrant community here. I also, a big part of my job, I support the town select board who makes all our public policy in town. And so my work there is to advise them on public policy and then ultimately take direction from the board to implement their public policy as the chief administrator for the community. I think the next generation, I'll hit the second part of the question there. I would say there's a lot of opportunity for folks interested in local government. And as I said, I didn't really see it as a career path when I was younger. I wish I'd known about it sooner. There's a real value in public service, being part of the community, helping residents thrive, and really think about how to interact and engage with the community in new ways, as we can see new media, new communications, ways to let people know what their community can do for them and help interact with folks. And it's exciting and engaging work, and no 2 days are the same.
That's great. So my organization, our work is primarily structured around our legislative agenda, which is a list of, this past year is about 12 policies that, if they were changed, would benefit the lives of young children and families. And so that's kind of how I think my work makes a difference in those communities is, when families get more money subsidizing their childcare, or when policies change to allow for more affordable housing to be built, so people can have easier access having housing and avoid experiencing homelessness. Those are the kind of things that I have a very small part in moving forward when my organization advocates for them from the perspective of young children and families. And so that's something that I feel really good about. And when I put my head on the pillow at night, I do feel like I made a difference in my community. And as far as how other people can kind of make a difference in their jobs, the next generation, I firmly believe that you can make the world a better place in like 99% of jobs. Like, you don't need to be like working for a nonprofit to like make your community better. I do think that it's easier to do that when you're at a mission-based organization, but mission-based organizations are nonprofits, they're businesses, they're the state, they're government contractors. And so I think one thing that I do really want to encourage people to do is think outside the box and think creatively about what jobs are available to you and what jobs you're interested in. And also from that job, what are little things that you can do to make your workplace better or make your community better, make that business more tied to your community. So I think there's a lot of progress to be done there as well.
Yeah, I agree. For anyone I know, with all these different panels going on today, folks in these careers have all gone through these pathways as well, and they've gotten there through interesting means. And I know if anyone thinking about a job, I'm sure if you reach out to someone to ask them what their story is or get more information, they'd be happy to chat with you about it, because we've all been there. We were in middle school and high school once too.
Mm-hmm. For God's sakes, when I was in elementary school, I wanted to be either a giraffe or a milkman. And so, your your life takes you in weird directions, but most of the time I feel like they're good directions.
Great, thank you both. And the next question is, what are some examples of how you use creativity in your work?
I guess I can start off that one. With my job, it's a lot of problem solving and building relationships with folks in the community, staff, my manager colleagues in Chittenden County and around the state. And I thought a little bit about this before, and part of my job is really working to hire the right fit for the job. The manager is the final hiring authority for folks, and asking the right questions to determine if they're a good fit for public service. Public service, you gain a lot to help out the community and work to help everyone thrive, but it's also not a career where necessarily going to be a millionaire. You're not going to make $1 million in public service, but you get that reward from the public service side of it. So it's making sure people understand that, and that's a good fit for them, and they're a good fit for the organization. And other things I look at are new engagement strategies. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. We tried some online budget simulations last year. I host a town TV show on public access TV once a month. We're been on a little hiatus due to COVID, but I'm going to try that with Zoom here sometime soon. And just finding different ways to interact with people. And the town is starting what's called a form-based code study project that looks at zoning in town. In our growth center, if folks are familiar with Williston, kind of the Best Buy, Home Depot area in there, and thinks about how will we allow development that really defines the look and feel of the buildings more, and what the street relationships are. So we're starting a study for that that'll take a little over a year, and then the town may decide to change some of its regulations based on that study. So that's a really good opportunity for people to engage and learn more about the community and play a role in that public policy.
I think, similarly to Erik, my job involves a lot of engagement strategies and thinking about new and different and better ways to build relationships with people. I think over the last few months, what has become a pretty significant part of my job is communications around the election and voter engagement. So thinking about different ways that we can get people to vote and get people to vote safely, when a lot of the ways that we've been supporting people in voting, rides to the polls and other things aren't really available to us in the same way this time around. And so I think just kind of as a creative outlet through my work, I've been doing a bit more graphic design and trying to kind of build up our digital and social media presence to get those messages out. It's not something that I've done too much, but I think is increasingly becoming a part of government and advocacy work, is being kind of digitally competent and adventurous in what kind of graphics we're putting out there and how to get people's attention. And so that's one way in which creativity has been a part of my work, and I've enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, I would add to that point that strong communication skills are really helpful in the public sector, and finding those ways to engage, and whether it's social media work, graphic work, good writing communication skills, that goes a long way with a lot of careers here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. The next question is, what are some examples of how you use critical thinking skills in your work?
Mm-hmm.
You want to go first, Charlie?
Sure. So I think critical thinking skills come up a lot for me in the policy side. So you have advocacy, where you are pushing forward a specific idea, saying we should invest more money in X, or we should change this law to do Y. On the policy side is when you're really coming up with that idea. It's like, where should we put the money? How can we have like this objective, we have this goal, like how can we get from where we are right now to this goal? And thinking through all of the state systems and how to move each lever and how to achieve that goal, it can get really complicated. The system of services for children and families in Vermont is less complicated than most places. And, I've been in my job working with these systems pretty intimately for the last 2 years, and I'm still totally learning. And so it's taken a lot of critical thinking skills for me to think through all of these systems and all the different ways in which we can make children and families' lives better. And so that's something that involves a lot of critical thinking in my work.
Yeah, I would echo that on the policy side, where you want to achieve something, but then it's trying to figure out the roadmap to get there. And what I've like to do for the select board is come up with some different policy options and have different staff members participate in different teams with their areas of expertise to look at those options. And it takes time too. It's multiple meetings, multiple research opportunities, but at the end of the day, you can come up with a really good, positive outcome for the community. Probably the biggest thing we're getting underway right now is the town budget, which is the biggest policy document and largest process we'll work on each year. And right now it's trying to work through a budget with COVID going on still, and trying to think about the amount of money the town brings in to provide services to the residents. So we've had to make some adjustments this current year. And then we're trying to think about, okay, the budget that starts in July that people are going to vote on town meeting day, what's a good number to land on? And then I remember when I was younger thinking like, oh, it's a $11 million budget. And how do you even approach something like that? And I had a professor in grad school that talked about, it's just simple math, adding and subtracting to pull things apart and see how they all add up as a big piece of the pie. So it's working backwards from there. We're doing a lot of work on that right now. And I guess the other thing I do for critical thinking is a lot with kind of mediating issues for folks, whether it's working between departments, working between community members, trying to be that sounding board and trying to find a resolution if there's an issue someone's having with town operations. And sometimes that's tough because you have to hold the line sometimes and say, well, we can't do this, but we can do this for you. So it's a good variety and a lot of things to think about.
Awesome, thank you. So the next question is, does your job allow for flexibility in work schedule or job duties?
I can go ahead. So yes and no. So at least in my job, I have a lot more flexibility during the off session when the legislature isn't meeting. But January through May, in a traditional year, all of the legislators come and are meeting 4 days a week in Montpelier. And I have to be there right with them, at least those four days. And so flexibility in that I need to be pretty flexible in, when I can expect to go home. If there's a meeting that's running late, it's important that I be there. And so sometimes I get home a little late. But another thing that's very, very cool about policy and advocacy work in Vermont is that you do have a full half of the year where your job is completely different because the legislature isn't meeting. And people do different things with that. The person who was in my job before me went on a 6-week biking trip every single summer. And she could do that because this job is a lot less busy during that half. I spend a lot of my time doing community engagement activities, building relationships with our membership, doing some volunteer work and site visits, actually seeing the childcare centers and the food distribution centers and, building my understanding of what those things look like on the ground. So there's a lot of flexibility in my work schedule sometimes, and in my job duties about half the year. And it feels kind of like I have two jobs sometimes, and I love that. It keeps me interested. And I think I'm very lucky in that, I have a real diversity of job duties.
Yes, on my side, the town offices are open 8 to 4:30 daily, but those aren't the hours that I work every day. In local government and in state government, there's always going to be night meetings to go to, and the select board meets twice a month, and they meet usually from about 7 to 9:30. I've worked in other communities where they would meet much longer than that, 4 or 5 hours sometimes. So those would turn into a long day, but you know, in my role, I have to make sure that the jobs that get done each week get done. And that might mean some extra time at night, might mean some extra time on the weekend. But on the flip side of that, there's the flexibility to decide, okay, I'm in a good position where if I want to leave at 2 o'clock on Friday, I'm going to do that today, but I might come in Saturday to catch up on some emails or some work. The expectation, the job has to get done. So it's finding a way to do that, and there's some flexibility to do that.
What I also think is important for jobs like these, you know, I think it's clear that Erik and I both really love our jobs and see think our jobs are really important because they're helping people. It's hard to then take yourself away from work. And I think that it's important to get the job done. It's also important to make sure that you have a life outside of your work and that you are getting the sleep and exercise and socialization you need to stay healthy. That's something I think in our sector is people aren't very good at. And I hope that the next generation is better at drawing those boundaries.
That's a really good point, Charlie, because it's keeping that work-life balance. And, you know, I've done tricks like on your phone, you can turn your email off. So at a certain point in the night, I would turn the email off. I'm not going to look at it till the morning. I'm done working for today. Mm-hmm. And then there's sometimes when you can't do that either. But yeah, I agree. I try to get a lot of outside time in as well. And you got to keep that balance in this job and any job.
Awesome. Thank you. And then the last question is, what benefits beyond compensation does your organization offer? And what benefits would interest young workers?
I guess I could start with something I wasn't thinking about as a young employer. It wasn't really on my radar in high school. It's thinking about retirement when you're just starting in the workforce. And public sector jobs, municipal job here really offers a strong retirement program. There's still a pension available as one pathway for folks. There's not a lot of opportunities for that in the workforce these days. And there's a non-pension track as well. 5% of your annual pay is matched towards the employer. And another thing we offer is really good sick leave, vacation leave, then a really good health plan as well on the public sector. I mentioned it's not necessarily work where you're going to become a millionaire or anything near that, but there's good paying salaried jobs here, good career paths, and also good benefits. And that helps make up part of the complete package when you think about compensation in terms of benefits as well.
Yeah, so I think a retirement plan and a good healthcare plan is really important. Not something I was thinking about when I was in middle school, not something I was thinking about when I was in college, frankly. But these things drastically impact your quality of life in the short term and the long term. And so it's something that should definitely be on your radar. I think in advocacy, and particularly campaign work, in Vermont, there are a lot of jobs that are part-time or half the year, only during that legislative session. There are jobs that are temporary because they're for specific campaigns. And so I think that's something that you definitely have to weigh. A lot of those jobs don't have benefits available. And so thinking about, are those jobs that I want to do before I'm 26 and see if I like it when I can still be on other sources of healthcare, and then do something that, has a bit more of a compensation package later on in my 20s, 30s, etc. It's something to kind of keep in mind as you're thinking about where your career wants to go. I think also something that Erik mentioned is that you also in policy and advocacy are not going to get rich. I mean, there are a few people, but very, very few that make a lot of money doing this work. And that's something that, you know, I thought about and decided that I was willing to sacrifice making a lot of money to do a job that I really like and think is making the world a better place. And I think that that's probably like the best benefit that I do get from my job is feeling like I'm making a difference. And you know, compensation is really important, but at least kind of for me that comes second.
Yeah, I agree. With public sector jobs, just being able to say, hey, I did this today. There's little wins and big wins, I like to say. And, you know, at least every day you get a little win. You've helped somebody today. And I would say for folks, especially preparing to enter the workforce, you know, it's always good to ask those questions from an employer about benefits. And if you have any questions about what that looks like up front while you're considering a job, and don't feel like it's a burden or anything, because those are really good questions to ask when you're considering whether to take a job or not.
Awesome, great point. Okay, I'm going to, since we're done a little bit early, I'm gonna check the chat and then give a moment to see if anyone has any questions that they want to put in the chat. Okay, well, I'm not seeing anything right now, but I want to thank Charlie and Erik. Thank you so much for your time and answering these questions and giving so many helpful tips. And I wanted to let everyone know that this will conclude the event. And I'll actually put the website link in that you can access this video along with the other videos for the other breakout rooms. So I'll put that into the chat right now. And you should also be able to easily find it if you get to the VSAC website as well. Okay, so that's just in the chat for you if you'd like that. And yeah, so thank you both so much. Thank you for anyone who's attended. And that concludes our time. And so you can go ahead and say leave room, and then it'll pop up, and then you can click leave meeting.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much, folks. It was great to meet you, Erik. And
Yeah, you as well. Thanks, Charlie, and thanks, Lauren. Have a good rest of the day.
You too.
You too.